Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are going in depth into what I think the Charlotte Hornets should do with their cap space in the upcoming free agency period. However, before we start talking about the Hornets, I just want to leave a reminder for you to like and subscribe to the channel. I've been cranking out a lot of free agency coverage recently. With the draft coming up, I'm going to be having some draft videos coming out. And once free agency starts, we'll be talking about that all the time. So if you like basketball, this is the place for you. So why not just subscribe? Without further ado, let's get into the Charlotte Hornets. They have about $20.5 million in cap space for this upcoming free agency period, and I can see multiple routes that they can take in spending this cap space. However, before we get into that, I want to talk about the current pieces that are on this roster as of right now. At the point guard position, Devontae Graham and Terry Rozier are the two guys running that spot. Graham is a guy who can really shoot the ball. Actually, both of these guys can really shoot the ball, especially off the catch and shoot. They're both spectacular. Graham shoots the ball very well off of a pull-up. He is up there with like Trae Young, Damian Lillard, Steph Curry as one of the best pull-up three-point shooters in the game. So that is obviously a huge skill for him. Rozier isn't quite as good at that, but he is one of the better spot-up shooters in the game. So at the point guard spot, they've got shooting down. However, what they need to work on is what they do when it is not a shot from the three-point line. Devontae Graham is a bit better at Terry Rozier at this because of his ability to create shots for his teammates off of the drive. He's able to attack closeouts at a decent level and create some open looks for his teammates from the perimeter. However, he has absolutely no game at the rim, and even in the in-between, he is not a good floater shooter. He is one of the worst finishers in the entire NBA at the rim. And overall, once he puts the ball on the floor, his value on offense goes way down. Except for his playmaking, because like I said before, he is good at finding open shooters. Rozier is even worse than Graham. He's not much of a finisher at the rim. He does have a bit more of an in-between game than Graham does, but he's still certainly not terrific in that area of the court. And he's not quite the passer that Graham is either. So both of those guys are really good three-point shooting guards on the offensive end, but on defense they both struggle due to being smaller point guards that I think that both of them do give a solid amount of effort, but they're just not super gifted on that end of the floor. I don't know that you can play these two alongside each other as the Hornets tried to do frequently this season. I think that they're probably going to have to choose between them at some point in the near future. Rozier has 2 years left on his contract. Graham has 1, and he will be a restricted free agent following that. Graham is also extension eligible, and I would expect the Hornets to work really hard to get an extension done with him by the end of the season. I think that he's probably going to get something in the range of 4 years, $60 million based off of his production this past season. So if I'm the Hornets, I really want to secure him as a guy that you can have as a supporting piece for whoever you trigger this rebuild around in the upcoming seasons. On the wing, there are a lot of guys that are intriguing to me as guys that they took in the second round or had undrafted. And I actually think that that's something that's gone very underrated with the Hornets, as they've done a magnificent job with drafting in the second round, as well as picking up guys on two-way contracts to play for them in the G League. They've unearthed some guys that I really think have potential to be NBA players, and that starts with Cody Martin. Oh gosh, I hope I'm doing this right. Cody Martin is a fantastic defender. I just am worried that I'm mixing the two brothers up, but I'm pretty sure that Cody is a fantastic defender. He's very versatile, very switchable, can guard multiple positions, and that's very important at the NBA level. He's an intriguing role player to me for this reason, and I think that at some point he could be a really solid option for the Hornets to slot into lineups alongside their guard of the future. However, where Cody needs to improve is his jump shot. He shot the ball at about 23% from the three-point line this season, and that's not going to fly in the NBA. If he can take significant steps forward in that three-point shot, I think that he has a chance to be a really, really solid role player for years to come. Outside of him, you've got his little brother, Caleb Martin. Actually, I shouldn't say little because I'm not sure which one is older, but Caleb Martin is probably the not as good of the two. He's on a non-guaranteed contract next season, and the spot where he does have Cody beat is that he's a really, really solid shooter. He's not quite knocked down from the three-point line, but he has shown that he can shoot it quite a bit. On defense, he has potential to be similar to his brother as a versatile defensive player. However, he hasn't quite shown an ability to guard at the same level as Cody. But if he can figure that out and become a guy that can guard wings at an average rate, due to his shooting ability, he has a chance to be a rotational wing player in the NBA for years to come. The third guy is someone that I am really, really intrigued by. That's the 6'10 string bean, Jalen McDaniels. He's on a non-guaranteed contract for this upcoming season, but I really think that the Hornets should pick this one up. Jalen is super long, super athletic, and for that reason, he has a chance to be a very, very good defender in the NBA. I think he has some rim protecting potential due to his height and length. And he's also a versatile guy who can switch on the perimeter. If he can put on some strength and fill out his body a little bit, get a better frame in general, then I think that Jalen McDaniels has a chance to really, really stick as an NBA player. And the Hornets did a great job taking him with the 52nd pick last year. He also shoots the ball really, really well on the offensive end of the floor. And I should say he shot the ball really well from the offensive end of the floor in his NBA minutes this past season, as well as the minutes he played in the G League this past season. If that proves to be a fact and that he can really stroke it, Jalen McDaniels has a chance to be a really solid NBA player in the future, and he's a guy that I'm definitely going to be looking out for on NBA roster, or on the Hornets roster in this upcoming season. Outside of those three, you get into some more guys that they actually took in the lottery, so they're probably better players, but they don't quite excite me to the same level because it's not as great player development like we've seen with those three. But Miles Bridges is a solid NBA wing. I think that at this point, his floor is a rotational wing on a good NBA team, and his ceiling is perhaps a starting wing on that kind of team. If he can improve his jump shot and take it from that 32 to 33% mark that he's been hitting it at in the past couple years and get that up into the 37 to 38% mark, you're going to have yourself a really solid 3-and-D wing. Bridges does have to take some improvements on the defensive end of the floor as well, but overall, the jump shot is really the swing skill with him. He also needs to work on his decision-making, as he was a little bit turnover-prone whenever the ball was in his hands with the Hornets this past season. So if he can iron out those kinks in his game, I think he can be a really solid wing. Malik Monk is the other guy who is a lottery pick that is among the wing group on this team. Malik is still somewhat intriguing. He's one of the more entertaining bad players in the NBA to watch due to his ability as a bucket getter. He's still a really good shot creator for himself, and he still can put the ball in the basket. However, outside of that, he's absolutely atrocious on the defensive end, and he doesn't do much to create for his teammates either. So there's questions about this guy, and he really is going to have a big season this upcoming year to prove himself as a guy that the Hornets need to keep around for this upcoming rebuild, following the departure of Kemba Walker in last year's offseason to the Boston Celtics. The last wing guy is a guy that is notorious for the amount he is getting paid by the Charlotte Hornets, and that is Nicholas Batum, who has a player option, but he would be absolutely dumb to decline that player option, as it's paying him $27 million next season, and I think that he isn't worth anything more than the minimum. So it's a gross overpay of Batum, and obviously he's going to opt into it. And not much else to say about this guy. He is on a massive decline right now, and honestly is not an NBA player anymore. but because the Hornets signed him to that massive contract a couple of years ago, he's going to be on their roster. And yeah, he's a huge expiring contract. Maybe that's the best thing you can say about Nicholas Batum at this point. At the big man position, the Hornets have probably the most intriguing guy on the roster to me, and that's PJ Washington. Washington proved that he's a solid three-point shooter, shot the ball around 37 or 38% this past year, has a pretty solid defensive game. He has a really good frame as a guy with a 7-foot wingspan at 6'7", and he's pretty well built at 230 pounds of muscle. If he can develop a game attacking those closeouts and developing himself into a guy that can slash a bit and also improve his playmaking and shot creating for his teammates, PJ Washington's a guy to keep your eye out for. If he can make those improvements and continue to increase his activity level on the defensive end and continue to get better over there, this guy could be like a guy that makes an all-star team in a season or two. So definitely the most exciting guy on this roster to me, although you could make an argument for Devontae Graham in that category. The last guy would be Cody Zeller. Zeller is what he is. He's a solid defensive player. He is a really, really good screen setter, one of the better screen setters in the NBA, which continues to be an undervalued trait. And he seems to be developing a three-point shot a bit. He's always been a solid free throw shooter. Last year he took the step out to the three-point line. He didn't shoot the ball very well from there, but I think the fact that he's starting to take them is an improvement, and we could see him develop a three-point shot that could make him a really interesting stretch five for years to come. He is expiring next season, and I think the Hornets could look to keep him around on a much cheaper deal for the future as a guy who could be a very serviceable backup center if they draft a center in this upcoming draft, and if not, a guy who can be a stopgap starter for them at the 5 spot. In terms of outgoing free agents, there's 3 guys on this roster: Bismack Biyombo, Willie Hernangomez, and Dwayne Bacon. Biyombo is a solid rebounder and rim protector who doesn't have any offensive value whatsoever. However, because of his ability as a rebounder and a rim protector, he is someone that will probably be in the league next year, either as a backup center or a third center. And I think that the Hornets could look to bring him back. It wouldn't be anywhere close to what he was getting paid, but if you can get him for the minimum, keep him around, I think that that's an okay deal for the Hornets. Willie Hernangomez is another big guy who seems to be a bit of a dinosaur, really just has most of his game in the post, and I don't know that he's worth much more than the minimum as kind of just a guy who's filling out a roster spot for you. I think that his brother Juancho is a much more intriguing player than Willie is. And the last guy in this group of expirings is Dwayne Bacon, who showed flashes of being a guy who can really defend and has some athleticism that could translate into being something on the offensive end, but his lack of a jump shot makes me think that he's not really an NBA player at this point and will probably either be in the G League or overseas next year. In the draft, this team does have some solid picks with the 3rd pick and the 32nd pick. With the 3rd pick, obviously, they're going to be looking for a guy they can build their team around for the future. And at the 32nd pick in this draft, I think you can find a really solid rotational piece in the future if you make the right choice. With the 3rd pick, the guys that I can really see them going with are James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball, Onyeka Okongwu, and Anthony Edwards. Wiseman and Ball are my 2 top players in this draft, and for that reason, I think that they would be the best options for the Hornets. I would prefer Wiseman over Ball just because of the way he fits with this roster as a guy who could be a really good screen setter for Rozier and Graham as the guards, as well as a guy who can really be the centerpiece of the defense and a really good rim protector for them. Ball does overlap a bit with Rozier and Graham, but I don't think that you're passing on the guy who I believe is the best prospect in this entire draft due to Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham. Onyeka Okongwu would be my third option because I view him as a guy in the same tier as Anthony Edwards, and similar to Wiseman, he fits the roster better. And finally, Anthony Edwards can be the guy that they really want to rebuild around if he would be the choice here with the third pick. He has potential to grow into a guy who can be a big wing, and for that reason, there's a lot of intrigue, especially if he can figure out how to utilize his physical tools to be an effective slasher type player while also improving his shot selection and defense. But I really would just prefer them going with one of the trio of Wiseman, Ball, or Okongwu, but I would certainly understand the Edwards pick if that was the direction that the Hornets went in. With the 32nd pick, like I said before, I think that that's a spot you can grab a really solid guy who could grow into a rotational piece for you. And I think that due to their dearth of options at the point guard position, they would be more likely to opt to draft a big man or a wing at this spot. And I've got a couple names that I would be interested in if I were the Hornets. Xavier Tillman is a guy who can come in and be a solid option on the defensive end of the floor. He is a bit undersized for a center, but he's a smart player and makes good decisions. And for those reasons, I think that he'll end up being just fine on defense despite his undersized stuff. On offense, it would help if he could shoot the ball a bit better, but he's a solid playmaker. And he's a really good offensive rebounder as well, despite being a bit undersized. So I do think that Xavier Tillman will be a solid guy as a rotational option in the NBA, and for that reason, I would have some interest in him with the 32nd pick if I were the Hornets. Daniel Oturu is another big guy who can score the ball a bit from the post, has some potential as a good rebounder and rim protector. He's not my favorite big guy. Actually, my favorite big guy in this part of the draft would be the next guy, Zeke Naji. I think that Naji has a chance to grow into a very switchable big man who can also shoot the ball at some point. So for that reason, I really like Naji, and I would certainly be interested in him at this part of the draft if I were the Hornets or any team for that matter. Robert Woodard is a freak athlete who can really, really finish the ball. He showed some glimpses of being a solid shooter as well, and if those glimpses can come true, this could be a chance to get a really solid role player for the future pretty late into the draft. Finally, Elijah Hughes is a guy that I really believe in. He's a bit more of a playmaker than a guy like Woodard, and he can also shoot the ball pretty well, especially off the bounce, as we saw him take a lot of difficult shots at Syracuse as he was counted on to be their main option on the offensive end of the floor. But he can also play make quite a bit, and I believe in him being a solid defensive player despite really not knowing much about that defense due to him playing in the Syracuse zone throughout college. Finally, they have the 58th pick, and at this spot, Tyshawn Alexander is a guy I want to target if I am an NBA team with a pick late in the second round. But outside of that, I'm not going to act like I know too much about these prospects, and I won't say much more about that 58th pick. So finally, after long last, we are getting to the reason why you clicked on this video, what the Hornets should do in free agency. My first option, if they do not draft a center, would be to go for the big name, and the only big name that really makes sense for them on this roster would be Christian Wood. Wood showed potential to be a guy who can really be a stat sheet stuffer, both in the scoring column with some solid post moves as well as a three-point shot, as well as a really good rebounder. He's decent defensively, and if he can continue to improve there, he's got a chance to be a really solid option as an NBA big man. If they do draft a guy like James Wiseman or Onyeka Okongwu, however, I would not look to use my cap space on Wood, as I figure that he will probably be a pretty expensive guy if you're going to lure him away from the Detroit Pistons. Probably a deal would have to be paying him in the $16 to $18 million range. And if you already have a solid young center like Wiseman or Okongwu, I think that you could certainly use that cap space in a wiser fashion. And if they do draft a center, I still think that they could be looking to add another center. So for that reason, a guy like bringing back Bismack Biyombo or signing a guy like John Henson to be your third center could be a solid idea. After that, I really just think that finding some young guys that can really ball could be a good option for the Hornets. Guys like Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr., Harry Giles, Damian Dotson, and Kenrich Williams could all be intriguing guys there. Dunn and Williams and Derek Jones Jr. can really defend, and if you can improve their jump shots, they could become really solid options as NBA starters at some point. Giles is a big man that has flashed some potential, and if you believe in that potential, he could be a cheap option for a lottery ticket. And Dotson can really shoot the ball, but he needs to have improvements on the defensive end. He also is in the Knicks player development system, which is pretty atrocious. So if you want to take a shot at him there and think that he could be better than he showed during his time with the Knicks, he could also be a cheap option. So yeah, that's about all I've got. Let me know in the comment section down below what you would do if you were the Hornets. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That's it for me, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you all again very soon.